Welcome everybody to the Innovating Education Ecosystem panel discussion. I'm really excited about all the speakers today, and I'm also proud of the fact that together we actually made Texas the #1 on the event board of Global Entrepreneurial Week that is celebrating across the world right now. Yes. So this is part of the Houston Innovation Summit, and I wanted to welcome everyone and also give you a little background of how Sruti and I, started planning this education track, part of the Houston Innovation Summit. For those of you who didn't know about myself, my name is Sunny Zhang. I'm a marketing professor at the University of St. Thomas. I've been teaching for 16 years, including 8 years online and hybrid. I'm also the founder and president of Z-Lab, innovation. So Sruti and I started talking about innovation for a long time, especially with the focus of education. So we've been planning a panel around this Houston Innovation Summit as the perfect fit. And the theme today is innovating education ecosystem. So I'd like to invite everybody to take a quick look at my background, which is really a way of shifting from looking at education as the traditional kind of pyramid hierarchical system to a more ecosystem approach where everyone as a stakeholder has their contribution, whether you are a school administrator, a teacher, a student, a parent, a caregiver, a nonprofit organization, or government agency, or entrepreneur that's pushing technology adoption in education. So this is the reason we wanted to nurture a community of innovation for education and welcome everyone to join our community. So today we are going to kickstart our first event in the education innovation track. And I can't wait to introduce our moderator of the day, Sruti Ramaswamy, my great friend and the director of SoGal Foundation Houston and the chief strategy officer of Camppedia. So Sruti, in one word, can be described as an innovative strategist and always passionate and curious. Her career has spanned from innovative technology to biofuels, and today she's an advisor to Edtech startups and to nonprofits to develop innovative strategies and build strong relationships. In early 2020, Sruti started the SoGal Foundation in Houston to help teens, young adults, and diverse business leaders with educational and wellness support that support their path to success. So I can't wait to hear amazing discussions coming out of this panel. I'd like to give the floor to Sruti, but also invite everybody to actively engage in this conversation. If you have any thoughts during the panel discussion, please feel free to send messages in the chat window. And we're also going to open the floor for questions at the end. All right, go ahead, Sruti.
Thank you, Sunny, for that awesome introduction. And more than me, today it's about our great panelists and the education experts we have in our community. So I would like to introduce them. So first we have Trustee Natasha Butler from Alief ISD. Hello, Natasha. Thank you for taking the time and being with us today. Next, we have Loretta Williams, the founder of Supergirls Shine Foundation. Sorry, Loretta, got that a little bit wrong, but thank you for being here today and sharing your expertise. And finally, my friend Frances from the school district where my kids go to, Cyfair. She's the vice chair for the CLC here at Cyfair ISD. So thank you for coming, Frances, today. Thank you very much. And today the goal is for this panel discussion to kind of look at the education from an ecosystem perspective. There are so many stakeholders in education between teachers, parents, business leaders, community leaders, nonprofit leaders. So that's kind of the view we are going to look at education today. And also, I guess, the word innovation, because innovation is part of 2020, if I may say so. So without further ado, I would like each one of our panelists to give us a little introduction about themselves and share how and why they got into the education space. So first, I let Trustee Natasha Butler go first. Natasha, the space is yours.
Hi, thank you all so much for attending this event. So I am a school board trustee in Alief Independent School District, as well as the small business owner of Spice Lane Community Investment Group. And so I got into education specifically because I noticed that students of poverty needed some extra resources, and they needed some opportunities to be able to explore and grow and be challenged, but as well as to have that mentorship and to have access to after school programs, as well as great people like my colleagues that are on this panel. But I know that for students specifically, they need to see and experience people who may not necessarily always be the traditional space. And so for myself, I'm a single mom of 2 students. And so I know that my voice doesn't always resonate in that space. And so that's how I got involved in education, was to look at it from a standpoint that I can be a single parent but still be involved. And so I wanted to challenge other parents to as well to understand what's happening in education, from their local as well as to the state, as well as to the federal level.
Thank you, Natasha. Thank you for that. And next we have Loretta. Could you share a little bit about us, please? Oh, about you, sorry.
Okay, I was going to say I didn't have that note, but
no, that's me thinking 100 miles an hour. Sorry.
That's okay. Imagine Black girls growing up in a community where resources are limited. Imagine Hispanic girls growing up in a community where resources are limited. Imagine girls being in school settings where their voice is not heard or valued, and sometimes is not even challenged or even encouraged to speak up in the science and math areas. That's why Supergirl Shine Foundation exists. As a former educator in middle school and high school, I saw girls that looked like me and that looked like some of our guests on here today that were not speaking up because they were never given the space to really speak up or encouraged to think outside of the box or become critical thinkers and problem solvers, as I am and a lot of my colleagues. As a STEM professional for over 20 years, I knew that STEM was not just a subject, but it actually is a way of life. And so therefore, when we look at STEM as a driving force of our economy, and we allow it to drive our thoughts, our imaginations, and we include all genders in this, then now our nation, our country, the nation, our countries, our world, our cities, our states, and our communities win. More importantly, why Supergirl Shine Foundation? Well, we do 3 things. We provide consistent exposure plus access with tangible opportunities for girls 10 to 17 in underserved and underrepresented communities in STEM, innovation, and leadership initiatives. And when a girl understands that she is no longer classified as disadvantaged, she can no longer be taken advantage of. And that's why girls are super in Supergirl Shine Foundation, and that's how we shine. Representation is another reason why we exist. One of the reasons why girls may not be going into the STEM fields is because they don't see ladies who look like them. Well, we're closing the gap to make sure that our girls are not just having a volunteer as a day thing or an activity that happens once a year, but it is our mantra. We do this 365 days of the year. We expose them, we give them access, and we teach them how to own their voice so that when they come to the table, they know how to add value, and then they'll be asked back to the table to keep adding value. I am Loretta Williams Gurnell, the founder of Supergirl Shine Foundation.
Thank you, Loretta. Thank you. You're doing amazing work, and thank you for that. Next, we have Francis Romero from the CLC. So the floor is all yours, Francis.
Thank you, Sruti. I'm Francis Romero, and like Natasha, I come here mainly as a parent who got really involved once my children entered public schools. I do have a public policy background. My career began in public policy, and I worked in the state legislature for 6 years. I was very involved in the policymaking process, and know it well, and know that it takes a community. It takes several communities. It takes people with a voice to bring the message to our legislators, to let them know the needs, the specific needs of our school districts, of our students, because it varies throughout the state of Texas. We're a big state. So my foundation behind the subject of education really started with my policy background. But as I became a mom, and I was an educator briefly, I did have a very short career in teaching, and so I did walk in the shoes of a CFISD ISD teacher. So I have that perspective as well. But I have a lot more years experience on the other side of being a parent, and involved in being a volunteer, participating in PTO, holding offices on the boards, and also being involved on the district level with the Volunteers in Public Schools Executive Board here in Cy-Fair. So I've even though I've been off the payroll, my work has never stopped. And so education has just been sort of where I've revolved around for the past 16 or so years as my children have grown. So I am involved with the district's Community Leadership Committee. We are a group of all of the stakeholders in the district. We represent parents, retired teachers and retired administrators, business owners, faith-based leaders, community leaders. We are a very good mix of what our community represents. And we meet once a month and we discuss public education and how decisions in Austin are going to be affecting our district. So we educate ourselves and get up to speed on what the priorities will be for the upcoming session. And we, as a group, form our own priorities for the district from our own organization, the CLC. The district have their own priorities, but for our community group, we set our priorities for our students. And so we will be advocating starting in January for our students when the legislature convenes again. So that's kind of been my central focus and involvement in education, probably for the past 10 years or so.
And thank you for all that you do, Frances, for our community. It takes a lot of work and a lot of voluntary work, so thank you for that. And before I move forward, I just would like everybody to know that I am recording this session, and everybody will have access to this later. The speakers, the attendees, I will be sending this out later today, just to let everybody know. So my first question to the panel, and we'll start with Loretta this time, just to keep it a little interesting, is 2020. It has been the year of innovation. It has been the year of pivot. It has been the year of changing fast. When the pandemic hit early this year, how did your organization or your community embrace the changes and had to deal with them quickly? Loretta?
Wow, I love that question when I saw it, because I said, I don't know if we have enough time for all of these heavy hitters on this panel to be able to discuss that, but I'll just briefly share that at the beginning of, I will never forget it, because March 5th was our last Super Lady Break Fast event experience we had in 2020. March 7th was our Supergirls in STEM showcase. And I remember Joey reaching out to me. We connected on LinkedIn and he said, can you send me photos? Because I believe, Loretta, your organization was the last organization was able to actually have a physical event before we shut down on March the 12th. So those numbers, those dates, they resonate with me, and they sit real good in us to give us a driving force to be able to do something different. And we had to pivot. Another reason why we had to pivot is because we lost two of our major funders, which totaled about $30,000. And for a startup nonprofit that is small, not mid-sized yet, but small. In her 4th year of existence, $30,000 to almost $50,000 to $60,000, because when you receive, you get more for matching. So that was $50,000 to $60,000 out of our budget, and our budget had not reached $70,000 yet. So when you talk about pivoting, you still had the rest of the school year. We still had over 40 girls that we consistently were engaged with. We had to come up with some solutions. So the first thing we did, we stopped and we listened. We listened to our girls. We listened to their needs. We talked to our school partners. We found out what the problems were. And then we went in and we made sure that we were still connected, so that social distancing did not disconnect all that we had put in place with building relationships, safe spaces, and also building them as future leaders. So we took it online. My team quickly learned how to use Zoom, and I mean quickly. And we created these engagement conversations once a month. And when I tell you the impact that it made for our girls, we had girls who were in dual credit, we had girls who were in pre-AP, AP, and then regular general ed. The safe space that they shared with us was Miss Loretta. Thank you for being committed to come online each and every month with us, because we learned how to time manage, we learned how to pivot, we learned how to make decisions quickly, but we also had a unit where every month we could still engage with people that we were familiar with. And for the girls, that was everything. And so we created that space to have our ladies that look like them in industry to be able to come and speak. We also created that space so that they could have a safe space to dialogue and talk about some of the concerns that they were having with transitioning and being within social distancing. So I tell you, this has been awesome. And then we pivoted to the summer without funding. We put 6 girls into a research project where they studied the marginalized impacts, the impact on marginalized communities dealing with COVID. And we did that with a 15-year-old, a 15-year-old, a 16-year-old, a 17-year-old, a 19-year-old, and a 21-year-old. These girls will now be, and young ladies, will now be researchers at the age of 15 to 21. And they worked with PhDs. I also worked with a MIS, a biochemistry professor, a data scientist, and public relations, and myself. And so I am extremely excited that they continue in spite of no budget. That's how we pivot. Then we walked into the fall. We listened again. We asked our school partners, what can we do to help eliminate some of the stress of face-to-face? Because we knew virtual learning was going to be a hardship for some of our girls who did not have digital means, who were in low economic areas where the internet service was not high, was not strong, and that they didn't have the devices nor the family structure to be able to actually put that in with multiple siblings. So what we did, we reached out again to our Super Lady Network and to the community and said, these are girls we've identified. We've partnered with domestic violence shelters. We have Supergirls in there, and we are making sure that no matter where you live or the circumstances that an adult may have put on you, you are Supergirls in our eyes, and we're gonna make sure that the divide is no longer a divide in your life. So I would say to anyone, if you wanna really innovate in education, the first thing you have to do is listen. And the second thing is that you have to do is continue to stand up, speak up, and be a game changer and a problem solver in spite of.
Wow, that was awesome. Thank you. And I hope only more best wishes for your nonprofit going down the road. Next, Francis, could you share a little bit, because you had a lot going on. You came out last season, I know, with a big bill that came out of the legislature, and we had a big bond that came through CFISD. So could you share what this looked like for the CLC when the pandemic hit? Or for a parent and your volunteer organizations?
Absolutely, yes. I could touch on both. I could say as a parent, I was very concerned, not knowing with the new, well, it wasn't Schoology at the time. It was a different program that the district was using. But I was very concerned, if my child was really learning, is she really absorbing the material? She's a freshman in high school. You know, all those questions that most parents have were going through my mind. And she's older. I'm home, so I know that I could be there to monitor her, answer questions, give her you know, any additional support. But I know that there are a lot of kids who don't have that same support system, and so of course, as a community leader, that concerns me, because we have a lot of children in our district who have you know, parents who work outside the home and are left alone. And so those are all huge concerns that we have as a group who, you know, advocate for CFISD. House Bill 3 was a huge bill that really made a difference in terms of funding and allowing our school districts to have a little bit more flexibility on you know, being able to offer more compensation to our teachers and other. It was huge. It was comprehensive. And so our concern now as a CLC is, with the pandemic having affected the state's revenue, are all of those elements of House Bill 3 going to be able to continue to be funded? Because there were a lot of mandates that were put in place that require a continuous funding and a funding level. And with, you know, the state not really, you know, we're reading articles about there being, you know, like $5 billion shortfall. They're asking some of our state agencies to come in and make cuts 5% before even the session even beginning. So those are all concerns and red flags. So as a advocacy group for the district, we're going to be working really hard, sending emails, making phone calls, making visits up to the Capitol if we can, as parents and business owners, all the stakeholders that I mentioned earlier that make up this group, and just really hoping and praying that the funding will be sustained. And I think that would be best case scenario given the circumstances that we're in, you know, with everyone's budgets being affected and all of these cuts that have affected our entire country, but even more so Texas, because we rely on a lot of sources, the oil and gas. I mean, that's just not where it normally is, and so that funds a lot of our state's operating expenses. And so I know that our leaders are really stressed about that, and I know that they don't want to cut education in any way. We made great strides 2 years ago in the last session, and so we as a group, as a CLC, are going to be working really hard to at least try to advocate that the funding be sustained for House Bill 3, for all of the mandates and all of the programs that we were able to move ahead with from that bill.
Thank you, Frances, because that was a big win. Let's keep that big win going with HB 3. Natasha, so it's 2020 as a trustee of Alief ISD. What was one of the first few things you as a board of trustee had to get through for, you know, through this pandemic? What was one of the first things you had to work with?
So, so let me give you a little background about my district. So we are 97% are receiving free and reduced lunch. And we are 67% of our students are ESL, so they speak a different language. So immediately, you know, when we close a building down, 3 things happen. How do I feed you? How do I keep you safe? And how do I engage you? And so the first thing is that students in Alief, you know, they get their meals at school. So if I can't feed you, right, then I have to accept, how can you sustain and even understand what's going on in your world, right? And so we had to make a decision, you know, do we just want to feed Alief ISD students, or do we want to feed everybody? Because again, parents would come into our buildings through, you know, our family centers and get meals for themselves. And they had 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds. And so you have to make a decision of, okay, we've got these dollars in our budgets, right? How do we move that revenue around to be able to accomplish this goal immediately? Okay, so great. So then we open up schools and say, okay, you can come and get your meals. But then you have to think about, how are we going to keep our kids safe? Because a lot of our students are in spaces and aren't necessarily safe in their homes. And school is a safe place for them. That's where there's running water, air conditioning, meals, an adult, there's safety, there's security. So how can I support that issue, right? How do I keep you safe in your home as a school board trustee? That fell into my community handpoint. So I had to kind of take that trustee hat off. Then I had to think about, right, the law says I still have to educate you. How do I educate you? Well, so we had Schoology already in our district, but the issue became, did everybody have access to a device to be able to use it? Did everybody have access to the internet? And we realized very shortly, I would say within a week, a lot of our families had no internet access or no devices besides their cell phones. How do we engage our community? And so those business partnerships are really a big part that people don't really think about in the middle of a pandemic that filled in the gap, right? We always talk about filling the gaps, but we really need to reach out to them and say, look, we understand that you're struggling, but you know what? If you're at Citgo and you have computers in your office building, can my kids have them? Right? If you're at Halliburton, you're laying off employees, can my kids have them? Right? It took us, and it took a lot of, let me get out of that we don't need the help, but let me beg for the resources, right? Because I'm in Alief, which is a smaller shadow of HISD, which typically gets the resources. And so it took a lot for me to go and say, hey, I've got these former NFL players. I need 3,000 computers from you. And having to make those kinds of decisions. It was me going to city council in the city and saying, as a school board trustee, I need you. I need the support from the city. It was me going to the county in Harris County and saying, look, I need you. It was me even calling the Commissioner of Education and pleading the case that please know that you can't hold our kids accountable for STAR because they can't take STAR if they can't be fed, if they don't have a device. There's no way. Please don't penalize these systems. Right? So from a school board trustee, that's what I saw. But then remember, I have my own business. It's a community investment group. So then I went to all of my partners who invested in my group and said, you know what? I need something from you from Walmart, right? I need you to offer some free meals, right? And I went to HEB and said, hey, can you come and fill in the gap sometimes? I reached out to Comcast and said, how do we work up a system where my families who currently have Xfinity can't afford to pay the cable? How can we work that out? And it was a lot more about me negotiating, right, as a school board trustee, but even in my nonprofit status. And then I went to other nonprofits and said, how can you support these students who are learning online? And so we took college kids from U of H, Texas Southern, high school kids, everybody else, and said, we've all got to mentor and become teachers. I'm not a teacher by nature. That's not what I went to school to do. But I believe that everybody can help teach a child to read and to support. And so that became a bigger lens. And then I had to think about all of my employees, right? When you shut down schools, right? There's a lot of employees that people don't think about. Those bus drivers, those crossing guards, those police officers, those cafeteria workers, they're hourly employees. How do we pay them, right? How can I keep their families afloat because they still have to work, right? And so it becomes more complex than just thinking about it from the surface lens. I have to think about it from the social lens. And then my ESL students specifically. They don't already speak the language. How do they learn online when the way in which you learn language is to see somebody's mouth and to be able to pick up that skill set, right? So, what does that look like for them? And so having to figure out and get staff to be able to understand that you got to use Google Translate now. You have to be able to work in these spaces to be able to serve our students, because at the end of the day, even though the building was closed, right, education had to continue. And so that slip of education, right, is always in the back of my mind, because we know that children of poverty, when they're not in school, there is that slide. And so how do we put in a little bit of protection to kind of soften that blow, right? But now here we are in November, and these kids have been out of school physically since March, right? That's a lot of time that they have not been in a classroom to be taught. And my thoughts and my worries and my prayers are, how do I catch them up? How do we get them ready? And so all those lenses, but again, as a parent, I had a child that was a senior who missed out on all the great memories like prom and homecoming, right? Who was being recruited to go play sports full-time at Penn State and couldn't get to a gym to work out and show her skill set. But then I had another daughter who was a high school student who was trying to figure out, how can we sign her up for AP Physics online? What does that look like to do AP Physics online? And so all three of those hats were moving at the same time. And it's the hamster wheel, it's constantly working. I know Loretta personally, and her and I have worked together with the Alief STEM Advisory Council, and we weren't able to come together and do what we do best as women of color and say, here's what we can do to help support. And so it really has been a challenge, but I believe that if anybody can solve the problem, it is educators and people who care about education.
Well said, Natasha. I think that's what it is. Everyone who cares about education and the community around it. So thank you for that. My next question is about the education ecosystem. It's very different from other ecosystems. You have different stakeholders. You have parents, you have teachers, you have administrators, you have board members, you have the government, you have the community at large. So when you have to make decisions, how do you get everybody's buy-in, right? There's so many stakeholders in this. So, and especially this year when you had to make so many changes, how do you make sure everyone or most people are bought into those changes? And I let Francis go first, and then Natasha, and then Loretta.
Great question. I can say that from our grassroots initiative, which is the CLC, because we are a group made up of all of the various stakeholders in the district, I think that's a good start. So I encourage any school community to maybe gather a group of people, maybe find a person to get a group similar going, because it really does make a difference. I have to say that in the past, the CLC has been around for quite some time, and I've been a part of it for 6 years. But I can say that having an advocacy group, having a group who's got the district's back, and this is, we represent everyone here. So when we meet monthly, we're educated. We usually have a legislator or someone within education to come and talk to us about, what's happening, what's the latest going on, and how our kids will be affected. And so by us getting educated, and everyone gets the same facts, we are then able to go out and connect with other groups that we belong to and share that information. And so that's the beginning. That's how you begin to get buy-in from others in your communities, because you start with the group who can get us all the information that they need and go out and share that with as many groups as you can. That's the beginning. And then I will say that it's going to have to happen at the state level. The state, we're so big and we're so diverse, and our districts vary in size. We have over 1,000 school districts in Texas, and we're on the bigger side. We're definitely on the larger side here in the Houston area, but there are some rural districts that we have like 1,600 students and for their entire student population. And so I actually listened. They had a Senate Education Committee hearing last Friday, so I watched it, and it was very, very informative, because there was testimony given by the Dallas ISD superintendent. And then there was also testimony given by a very small school district on the outskirts of San Antonio. And the common thread that I took from both of their testimony in terms of, the moving forward with technology and how what this pandemic has taught us, and where we go from here. The common thread is that the broadband availability, of course, was a big one because that's a problem for the rural areas. But I understand that it's also a problem even within some of our larger populated areas. I know we had some issues here in Sci-Fair, and so they in purchasing hotspots, and there were some issues with, well, we had to go to more than one provider because one provider services did not work as well in certain areas of our district. So they had to go to another provider. So that's something that's happening throughout our state. And so the broadband capabilities is one, and also funding for virtual school learning. Now, this is nothing new. Some of the testimony that I heard, I was really pleasantly surprised to hear that a lot of districts are already moving toward a virtual school learning model. Dr. Hinojosa with Dallas ISD testified that they had already been in a partnership with Apple, and they have plans to open a virtual learning school, brick and mortar, August of 2021. This was before the pandemic hit. These were plans that they were already looking to moving forward on. And so I think that when we ask ourselves, where do we move from here? I think that the pandemic just kind of forced us to kind of, it basically gave all of us a shove that no one was prepared for, right? We kind of had some idea of where we wanted to go and where we could see ourselves in the future. But the pandemic just kind of pushed us ahead. And it's something that in experiencing that as a country, but mainly here as in the state of Texas, is that they learned a lot, and they learned that students, there is a large population of students that actually prefer virtual learning and did very well with it, considering the circumstances. So it's something that I know that many of our districts want to continue to do and move forward on, but of course we will have to take some steps back and work out all of the kinks. But I will say that there's a common thread to continue with moving forward in technology and virtual learning. That there are some very good points that our children benefit from. Not all, but there. I would say I think from the testimony from Dallas, a good 20% of their students like virtual learning and did very well. So I think that it's a positive thing. I think there are some positives that we could take from this. There's a lot that we learned. And so I think moving into this next legislative session, they are going to be dealing with a lot of these issues. I can send the link to everyone of the Senate Education Committee hearing because it was very interesting to hear from different parts of the state how there are similar likes about virtual learning, and then there are also similar obstacles, whether you're a small district or a large district. So I think if we embrace that together, and start with your grassroots community and have your advocacy ready to advocate for your district, but also from a broader sense, we're gonna all have to meet up and work a lot of this out on the state level. But we do share a lot of commonalities on this issue.
Thank you for that insight, Frances. That's pretty amazing that Dallas ISD has something coming up next year. I think a lot of us saw excitement when you said that. So thank you. Natasha?
So I think, for me, when I look at how do I engage every stakeholder, I can't start from the top down. I have to start from the bottom up. So who are my customers that I serve, right? So education is a customer service industry, but we don't typically think about it from that context, right? That we are serving students. There is a need there. So instead of me going to talk to the top, I went to kids and said, what do you need as a kid, right? That word equity has become a buzzword, but we got to really put that into practice. And so I said, well, let me talk to students. So I talked to second graders and third graders and high school kids and said, how do I keep you engaged? What do you need specifically? And, in that conversation, I found words like, I need to be able to work, miss, because my mom can only work part-time from her job because they closed the hotels, right? What does that look like for that kid, right? Then I went and talked to parents and said, I need your help. I know that you work 2 jobs, 3 jobs, 4 jobs right now, but we got to put some space and not let these high school children miss out on their education to help raise their younger siblings. But again, I understand the community that I serve. And so I worked out some arrangements with some other, with some of the kids' jobs and said, I need them to be able to work, in the evening time instead of in the daytime so that they can work. Then I went really to my high school kids and said, you do understand that what you're doing these 4 years, it's going to really set the stage for what the rest of your life looks like. So please don't give up right now. I'm not going to give up on you, so please don't give up on the system, right? And then even going to talk to teachers. I went and talked to like the teacher unions, and I said, nobody likes this. Everybody loves to be in class. Teachers love to hug on their students and see their smiling faces. How do I keep you engaged? What do you need? And a lot of what I heard from teachers was, I've never done this before. How do I teach online? That's not who I am. I'm the teacher that stands over the students and helps them write things and lets them actually be able to talk to me and communicate and come to me after school and before school and sit in my classroom and, maybe get a snack. How do I support those kids, Ms. Butler? What does that look like for me? Right? But then you have to think about, okay, now I got these principals, right? I have these principals who are in charge of these campuses, and they're trying to do something that they've never been done. One thing that I will say about this pandemic is this has reminded all of us that we are PBLs, right? That we do problem-based learning. It's just a matter of we haven't had to use those skill sets in a while. We haven't had to solve these problems. But to be honest, we didn't have to go back and reinvent the wheel because colleges were offering online classes for years, right? Like University of Phoenix and Texas Southern and A&M and University of Houston, they were having online programs. The issue was we never thought about it from that kindergartner or that pre-K kid or that first or second grade kid that's learning to read at the bottom, right? How do I get that to look like? And so I look at this and say, we are up for the challenge, right? That we can innovate, that we can solve today's problems. But then I had to realize as a school board trustee, it was time for me to use my voice with the state. It was really a matter for me to say, I need you to look at my district different than you look at Sci-Fair, different than you look at HISD, different than you look at Dallas ISD. We have our own needs too. And so how do you meet my needs with House Bill 3 funding and Sci-Fair at the same time? Right? And saying, I need that again this year, if not more money this year, because of the digital divide, because of the landscape. And so, grassroots is really about bringing everybody together and engaging them, but giving them that voice, that space for them to actually share. And one of the best conversations I had was with a Hispanic dad who told me in his language, and I had to use Google Translate because I am not fluent in Spanish. And he said to me, I need my son to work. I'm not worried about his education. He can catch up later, right? I need him to work. And I had to remember and talk to that dad and say, sir, I understand that you need him to get out there and help you cut grass. But is that really all that you want for your child, or do you want more for him? And so using that dad to go and talk to, the Commission of Education and saying, these Hispanic kids need something different. Like we've been trying to educate them in this same manner, but you can't teach somebody a language on a computer, right? How do we engage that? And so I really think that this has really taught us that it truly takes a village to raise a child, right? We've been doing everything in education in silos. We haven't thought about the small businesses, the large corporations, the mom at home who can cook a meal and drop off some apples, or somebody who can do all these things. But it really takes this entire village to step up, in the middle of a pandemic. I say that Hurricane Harvey was easy for us to deal with as an educator because we saw the storm coming. We knew when it was going to hit, and we knew when it was going to pass. This storm is still out here, and we have no idea when the storm is going to end. And so it's time for us to get out of crisis management mode, and it's time for us to get into, the implementation and to see the growth. And I think as a school board trustee, it specifically, impacts me when I think about how do I prepare these kids that are graduating this year who missed out on a whole year worth of education, and they're about to go to college and they don't have that skill set. They haven't, been able to use those critical thinking skills because it's just been crisis management. And so I'm glad to see that school districts are really thinking about this now intentionally. And one thing, just like what Francis said, there's a lot of kids who do very well online. There's not the interruptions. There's no bullying happening with them. They can be very trained and specific to their thoughts. And those kids do well. So equity has to really be about, let me serve each kid where you learn, right? If you learn at home, because that is the safest place for you, you can commit to something. Maybe we should let you work at home. Do your schooling at home. I realize that there's a virtual network for kids, but it really was about them being in high school, having to come to the brick and mortar to be online versus them being able to work remotely from home. And so I think that this innovation in education, it's time, it's needed. We've been educating kids the same way for the last 200-300 years, but these aren't the same kids. And so I think this is going to become one of those times in which someone's going to say, that history will define us based on how we solve this problem. So I'm looking forward to us solving this problem.
Thank you for that. I think it's I like that bottom-top approach versus the top-down approach. So thank you for sharing that with us. Loretta?
Yes, thank you. And I think I will jump in here as a wife real quick, if I may, because I'm a wife of an educator and a coach. And I'm a mother of two dudes who are teenagers, a middle schooler and a high school. And so I would like to talk from the parent-wife perspective in reference to how do I keep my family engaged and how do I keep my husband encouraged as an educator of over 23 years that's dealing with this new technology. He loves technology. Change is not foreign to him. But when you are strapped with going to the building as an educator, and this is for all educators, and then might be exposed and come home to your family every single day, that was a major burden for him as the head of our household, as my husband, as the father of our children, and the provider, because I'm a nonprofit leader. So he is the consistent provider. So that was a major concern for us. So going into this particular school year, I had to set aside some time to come out of being the founder of Supergirl Shine Foundation and really look at what is best for my family, what is best for my husband, so that he can then still be the giant that he is as an educator and be able to perform well and know that his wife and family are safe, but also support him. So that was a huge time, and we're not over it because he's there. His school is still receiving 2 to 3 phone calls a week in reference to new COVID cases. The basketball season has started, so he is now more engaged with more players one-on-one. His classroom is maybe social distance, but not in the gym. He has now been, he's been doing this for so long that for him, his prayer is that, babe, I just want to make sure I show up and give my best every day in spite of, right? Because this is what he does. And then my prayer is, Lord, just keep him safe so that he can be his best, but still come home to us well. And then we have 2 children who, like Trustee Natasha shared, they're 2 different types of learners. And so my oldest, he was adamant about going back to school. I mean, it is everything for him to be connected. He's in AP classes, pre-AP classes. He's a high schooler. He's an athlete. And it was a struggle for him, not in his academics, just him being able to engage. And I did my best to create spaces in our home to stay connected with his teachers. I mean, it was unbearable. It was really, really tough for him. His grades didn't slip, but I saw him slipping. And so we had to make a hard decision. And then our youngest son is, like Trustee Natasha said, some students are thriving with virtual learning. This child, he's always been academically sound, but I hear him in his space actually helping his teachers teach the class, troubleshooting online if his classmates are having problems with the chat or not able to find a form. And I come out of my office and I'm like, are you on the record as a teacher, or is your teacher the teacher of record? But what I'm loving is seeing him, he's innovating. And you know why he's doing that? It's because his village, his parents have championed him, championed his brother to say, you have to take ownership of what is best for you. And whatever is best for you, we will come beside you, behind you, around you, in front of you to make sure you get what is best for you. And I think that's what parents who are asking their children to work, because they're just trying to survive. In our approach, we're just trying to give them a different way to survive, and we call it education. It's the same thing that we do with our girls. We put something before them. We ask them, what is it that you want? What is it that you want from this program? Why is STEM even interesting to you? What do you want to gain? And then once we do that, the girls then have a voice. They come in these spaces and they speak what their needs are. They share what their needs are. And then now we're able to really get down to the bottom line is what happens after high school? And if I can leave you with this story, at 9:00 a.m. this morning, I had a fact-finding meeting with a new school partner in a district where its technology is the driving force of this high school. Innovation, it's there. So they understand what we're doing. The principal, who is a seasoned educator, said this to me. He said, I am concerned because we put all of this into our students in the 4 years. They tell us, we prepare them, they're excited, they meet engineers, and they go through the technology courses, the certifications. And then I go to HEB, I go to Kroger, or I go to Chick-fil-A, and I see my students, they're working after graduation. They never go to college. And he said to me with eyes that were big, he says, that's what my concern is that we put all this into them, but then they go back into their spaces of comfortability. We prepare them as so we thought we did. And then now they're in these particular jobs. And he said, there's nothing wrong with those employment opportunities, nothing at all. When you present a $12, $13, $14 an hour to a 17-year-old with benefits, that's a game changer for some of our students. Well, what happens when particularly girls of color, see a mechanical engineer, a chemical engineer, a petroleum engineer, a biochemist, a hematologist, a health professional, a woman welder, a woman mechanic? If they see that and then they become mentored by those women who look like them, and then they show them, and through our program, we teach them how you can earn scholarships to be able to pay for college and be able to make a higher earning to be able to help your family. But it takes not just showing up on a volunteer day to say, my company has checked off our community outreach. We've given you this check. We came, we served, but there's no continuation. So the difference between Supergirl Shine Foundation and a one-day volunteer setting is that we are in it to win it to the end. So when I look at that principle again after Thanksgiving, when we now connect as a real program, because he's bought into us being the problem solvers, and he's going to invest in us as we invest in him, I look at him and say, together we can provide exposure, access, and opportunities. Because at the end, in May, your girls will now be trained, equipped, and skilled to interview for technology and industry-based internships that are paid internships that meets the criteria for them to walk into college. And those businesses, small business owners, and also industries will never let her fail because they're going to make sure that she has scholarships to continue her education. That's how you keep them engaged. That's how you share with parents that you're in it to win it. I want the same thing that you want. You want your child to be successful. I want your child to be successful. Just let me show you how she can be successful for the long haul.
Thank you, Loretta. Wow. And I like how you shared it as a parent and as a wife. I think a lot of us were shaking our head and agreeing that that ecosystem of a family and how we have to deal with it has changed this year totally. We just have a few minutes left. There's one more question I would like to ask. So if people would like to just stay for a few more minutes. One last question I have is, Houston has become like the place for innovation. There are so many young businesses. There are so many startups. We have a few of them who are attendees today. How can they help this community? And with that, I have one person who's an attendee, Christina Perez. She's the CEO of Zenith Learning, and she has a question for the panel. So go ahead, Christina.
Sure. Thank you, Sruti. I thank you all for your information today. It's been wonderful. I guess my question is, I used to work for a school district and now I work for a private company, and we are a small, business, and but definitely, related to the education world. And as I think of the organizations that support school districts, a lot of small businesses do, but it is difficult to build that tie and that relationship. I do find that public schools or definitely work with nonprofits easier, but is there a hesitancy for small businesses, or is it just a more difficult process to support or build relationships? Because I know the pandemic has affected many, many small businesses who went into schools or provided services to schools. But so I was just wondering if there's any recommendations for how businesses that are for-profit can partner with and continue to survive during this pandemic. So I know Loretta's over here.
May I please? Woo, may I please? Okay, so sure. First of all, thank you for coming in this space, Christina. You are in the best place to be able to get that great question answered. And here is why. Community partners are everything for school districts. Nonprofits are community partners. But in the tech space, oh my goodness, you are a game changer, because as a nonprofit leader, what we do is we would partner with you to be able to get the technology, the curriculum, the hands-on, the internships available for the girls. What does that do for the school? The school has now a accredited program, if you will, apprenticeship, a project-based internship program where their girls can be with business owners and leaders who are now in touch with real-time, real projects, real programs of changing the game in reference to solving problems. So becoming a vendor, because I know that's probably the word that scares a lot of people with education, don't shy away from partnering with nonprofits such as Supergirl Shine Foundation, because great partnerships are able to go in and partner with the schools, and funders love great partnerships. So for example, as a 501c3 organization, we would be the fiduciary responsible organization on this MOU, but everybody wins. And so we get the tax break, if you will, but you get the problem solved, and the students get the skill building. And so it's a marriage. We have to court, we have to develop, we have to figure out where our lanes are, but it can be done. And the more community partnerships that we build like this, the better it is for our economy. Because now you as a small business owner can get fresh, new skill learners and workers to be able to help you with your programs, your design, your software. They get the skill building, and we get to close the gap. I hope that helps you, Christina.
Thank you, Loretta. Thank you. I think that's one of the biggest questions is, how do we help the innovation? How do we help the student system? How do we help the public education, the education system? So thank you for that, Loretta, because I know that was a question on a lot of people's minds today. With that, we are 2 minutes over. I wish I could take more questions, but we do have another event coming up tomorrow evening. Sunny, would you like to share a little bit, and then we'll have to wrap up?
Yes, thank you, everybody. I just really loved amazing panel discussion. I felt like so many great stories and great inspirations coming out of this. This is definitely not the end. It's really a great start during the Innovation Summit in Houston, but we want to continue the discussion. I think a lot of you guys mentioned that we listen for, this is exactly why we designed the 2 sections for the EdTech track. So we first wanted to hear all the voices from different stakeholders in the education ecosystem. And then we want to continue our discussion to see how technology can facilitate and enable us. So I'd love to invite everybody to tomorrow's EdTech Startup Showcase event at 5 p.m. And if you check the chat window, I've sent the eBright link, and we're also going to follow up today to remind everybody to sign up and join us tomorrow at 5 p.m. So I'd love to thank you again, Sruti, for being such an amazing partner with Z-Lab on behalf of SoGal Foundation. And I also like to thank amazing work that's being done by Impact Hub Houston, because they are the organizer of the Houston Innovation Summit, along with Global Entrepreneurship Network. And again, let's celebrate Texas as the #1 event and event state, and Houston as #5 event city, and Impact Hub as #3 collaborating partner. I felt like we can do this. We can do this. The first step is to recognize by listening. The second step is to really rise up and tackle these issues. So I look forward to discussing with all the amazing founders we have right here in Houston to see what are they doing to address digital divide, address all these skills that is all part of innovation. So thank you everybody for joining us. We look forward to continue our discussion tomorrow at 5 p.m. Thank you again for the amazing panelists. We've learned so much today, and really thank you for everything you have done and continue to do in the Houston and education innovations community. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. This was great. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. I appreciate the invitation and the engagement from the audience. Thank you to the sponsors.